50 Cent just pulled off the most surgical public execution hip-hop has witnessed in 20 years, and he never stepped inside a booth to do it. No diss track. No hidden verse. No warning shot. Just screenshots, silence, and a 3-word obituary posted in broad daylight while Rick Ross, the man who still introduces himself as the biggest boss, watched his brand new album get buried under 19,000 first-week units. 19,000. Let that number breathe for a second, because this is the same Ross who once looked directly into a camera and promised the world he could move 250,000 copies in 7 days if he ever truly felt like it. And by the time this video ends, the distance between that promise and this scoreboard is going to feel wider than ever. Now, before we go 1 inch further, I hope everybody watching is having a genuinely blessed day, because for the professional excuse makers we are about to place under the microscope, happy release week. I hope you are doing amazing, I truly do. And look, this might be the most fascinating breakdown I have ever put together on this channel, because what just unfolded between 50 Cent and Rick Ross stopped being a beef a long time ago. It is a case study now. It is a blueprint. It is a masterclass in how to dismantle a man using nothing but his own confidence as the ammunition. So you already know what to do before we move. If you believe 50 Cent just authored the most calculated strike of this entire 15-year war, hit the like button right now and let the tally speak for itself. And drop your verdict in the comments before we even get rolling, because I will be down there reading every single one. Did 50 Cent land the decisive blow, or is Rick Ross about to spin this whole disaster into the comeback story of the year? Pick a side early. It matters later. And I am not going to say too much up here, because it all connects by the end. Every clip, every post, every seating chart, every word of that live stream, it all comes together, and when it does you will understand exactly why certain corners of the internet have been in absolute shambles for 7 straight days. But to get there, we first have to address the loudest group online at this very moment. The unofficial fan club I have decided to name the Boss Patrol. The Boss Patrol. And I want you to know I tried to find a more respectful title. I genuinely sat with it, but these people have spent a full week doing unpaid public relations for a grown man who could not pick them out of a lineup, so this is the name they have earned. These are the folks who told you the album was going to shake the summer. These are the folks who said the rollout was flawless, that the interviews were legendary, that the boss was back in his bag. And now those same folks are explaining to anyone who will listen why 19,000 is actually a victory if you squint at it correctly. Here is the beautiful part, though. The Boss Patrol did not just get the prediction wrong. They helped build the trap. Every clip they boosted, every quote they celebrated, every podcast moment they turned into content, all of it raised the stakes higher and higher, until the fall had nowhere to land except on their hero's doorstep. And the man holding the door open the entire time was 50 Cent smiling. Patient. Saying absolutely nothing. That silence, and I need you to understand this before we go any further, was the loudest thing in the entire story. Because there is a rhythm to the way 50 Cent goes to war, and once you recognize the rhythm, you can never unhear it again. He does not brawl on your schedule. He does not trade insults to match your volume. He studies. He collects. He waits for the single opening where one move does the damage of 100. And Rick Ross, whether out of confidence or pure carelessness, built him the perfect opening and gift-wrapped it. A brand new album, released into a market Ross himself called soft, with the entire industry staring at the scoreboard. The trap was loaded weeks ago. The only question was when the numbers would drop. And when they did, everything changed. But to really appreciate how we got here, you have to understand the battlefield, because context is everything in a war this old. Rick Ross and 50 Cent have been exchanging fire for well over a decade, and somehow this saga keeps discovering uglier levels. This is not a normal rap disagreement that burns hot for 6 months and dies in a handshake at an award show. This is institutional. This is generational. 2 men who built entire empires, and yet neither one can resist reaching across the aisle to flick the other man's crown. Courtrooms, finances, family members dragged into the crossfire, humiliation engineered for maximum public consumption. This rivalry has touched everything. So when Ross rolled out his new album, Set in Stone, the release was never going to be just about the music. It could not be. Every move Ross makes lives inside the gravity of this feud, and he knows it. The evidence says he leaned into it on purpose. In the weeks before the album arrived, Ross was everywhere. Interviews, podcast couches, live streams, and in nearly every single appearance, one name kept slipping out of his mouth. Curtis Jackson. 50 Cent. The man Ross insists he defeated years ago. And on paper, the strategy made sense. Controversy is currency. Attention is oxygen. Every time Ross said the name, the blogs picked it up, the fan pages clipped it, and the algorithm did what the algorithm always does. From the outside, it looked like a veteran playing the modern promo game with extra seasoning. Keep the conflict simmering. Keep the name trending. Funnel every ounce of that heat directly into release week. And honestly, for a moment, it looked like it was working. The clips were flying. The quotes were everywhere. Rick Ross was setting the tempo of the entire conversation, and 50 Cent was uncharacteristically quiet. No posts. No jokes. No screenshots. Nothing. That silence should have been the warning sign. Because while Rick Ross was talking, 50 Cent was watching. While Ross was explaining who owns what and who saved who, 50 Cent was archiving every single word. And the moment those first-week projections hit the internet, the whole machine detonated at once. When the first wave of numbers surfaced, the internet did what it always does. It picked a side before it checked a fact. Early chatter claimed Rick Ross had moved somewhere around 19,000 units in week 1. Some reports floated even uglier figures. And before any official chart could settle the argument, 50 Cent was already online, already posting, already framing the story in the most devastating language available. He did not write a paragraph. He did not need one. A screenshot. A laughing caption. And a 3-word verdict that landed like a gavel. It is over. That is the efficiency of a man who has spent 20 years turning other people's bad weeks into his personal highlight reel. And here is what makes the whole thing so surgical. 50 Cent did not invent the numbers. He did not have to. He simply amplified them at the speed of light, attached his own commentary, and let the internet's appetite for humiliation finish the job. One post from 50 Cent did more damage than 100 diss tracks ever could, because a diss track is an argument, and an argument can be won. A screenshot is a verdict. There is no comeback bar for a screenshot. Now, to his credit, Rick Ross did not fold. He did not disappear. He got on camera and he swung back with the only counterargument available to him, and honestly, it was not a weak one. Ross framed the entire conversation around longevity and authenticity. His position, in essence, was this. The real flex is no bots. He argued that the dramatic second-week collapses you see from other artists are the telltale sign of inflated numbers, of streaming farms doing the heavy lifting. His album, he insisted, held its ground. No catastrophic fall-off. No smoke and mirrors. Just a consistent, organic audience showing up week after week. He called it the long game. He pointed to 20 years in the business. He reminded everyone that back when his rival was selling 1 million copies in a week, Ross was doing a fraction of that, and yet here they both stand, 2 decades later, still relevant enough that you are watching a video about them right now. That is not nothing. That is a legitimate argument. But here is where the story tilts, and I need you to lock in on this part, because it explains everything that happened next. Arguments do not trend. Humiliation does. While Rick Ross was delivering thoughtful monologues about artistic purity and the corruption of streaming metrics, 50 Cent was doing something far more devastating. He was curating a museum of embarrassment, one post at a time. First came the chart talk. Then came the ticket sales. And then came the moment that turned this from a chart dispute into something much, much darker. But hold that thought, because before we get to the mansion, you need to see the second war Ross decided to fight at the exact same time. And that decision might be the single biggest strategic blunder of his entire career. Reports and screenshots began flooding the timeline suggesting Ross was struggling to move seats for his tour. Images of venue seating maps covered in unsold sections. Promotional discounts being offered just to fill rooms. One widely shared post claimed a show in Detroit looked historically empty at start time, and that image alone racked up millions of impressions before lunch. Now let me be crystal clear about something, because fairness matters on this channel, and we are going to be fair all the way through this breakdown. Social media screenshots can be deeply misleading. A photo taken 40 minutes before a headliner takes the stage proves absolutely nothing about final attendance. Venues fill late. Crowds arrive fashionably late for veteran acts. Context gets crushed on the internet every single day, and this channel does not deal in propaganda. It deals in perspective. But here is the uncomfortable truth, and 50 Cent understood it better than anyone breathing. Perception does not wait for context. By the time anyone asked whether those photos were fair, the narrative had already sprinted around the world twice. The correction never travels as far as the charge. And 50 Cent, the veteran propagandist, built his entire second career on that single asymmetry. Then came the moment that turned the whole saga personal. Rick Ross posted a video standing in front of a jaw-dropping estate, a property he presented as $100 million flex, a monument to boss living, complete with a message aimed directly at his rivals about palm trees and real wealth. It was classic Ross. The luxury, the bravado, the larger-than-life energy that built his entire persona. And within what felt like minutes, 50 Cent fired back with a claim that set the internet on fire. The mansion in the video, he suggested, was not what it appeared to be. The implication detonated instantly. Rented wealth. A set piece. A prop in a movie about being rich. Now again, allegation is not proof. Rick Ross has spoken extensively about his actual real estate portfolio, including a Star Island mansion he says he purchased for $35 million, poured another $15 to $20 million into, and now values near $100 million. That property is real, documented, and genuinely impressive. Nobody serious is denying that. But in a perception war, the accusation itself is the weapon. 50 Cent did not need to win the real estate argument. He only needed to plant the question. Is it real? Is it rented? Is the boss actually the boss? And once the question is planted, every future flex gets viewed through that lens. Every car, every chain, every pool. That is not trolling. That is branding judo, using a man's entire identity as the weapon against him. And the terrifying part for Rick Ross is that 50 Cent has been running this exact play for 15 years, and it has never once failed to draw blood. But remember that second war I told you to hold on to? This is where the story mutates from a two-man feud into something much bigger, because Rick Ross was not just fighting 50 Cent. He was fighting on two fronts at the same time. And if you know anything about conflict strategy, you know that a two-front war is where empires go to die. In the middle of everything with 50 Cent, Ross had also been firing shots at Drake, publicly dismissing Drake's new project with a single brutal word. Horrendous. Think about the audacity of that for a second. In the same month your own album is fighting for its commercial life, you choose to disparage the most dominant streaming artist of the modern era. A man whose throwaway lussies generate more engagement than most artists' entire rollouts. Whether you call that fearlessness or recklessness, you have to admit it is a gamble. And the fallout came fast. Fans immediately began stacking the two albums side by side, set in stone against Drake's latest, and the jokes practically wrote themselves. Commentators pointed out that a single recent Drake song may have pulled streaming numbers comparable to Rick Ross's entire project. Industry voices piled on, openly questioning who advised Ross to re-emerge musically in the shadow of a release window Drake had effectively claimed as his season. Then Drake himself appeared to respond. Not with a name. Not with a direct address. Just a live stream monologue that fans dissected like scripture, talking about rappers dropping albums that arrive and vanish in the same breath and warning about replies, because his pen, as he put it, is not dry. Was it about Rick Ross? Drake never said the name. He never has to. In the court of public opinion, context is the verdict, and the verdict came back unanimous within hours. When you have history with somebody, every ambiguous bar becomes a bullet with your name on it. And the pile-on did not stop there. Tony Yayo, carrying that G-Unit banner like he has for 20-plus years, jumped into the conversation to laugh at the situation, pointing out that even an artist currently sitting behind bars managed to outsell Rick Ross's first week. 0 promotion. 0 interviews. 0 podcast runs. Think about how cutting that comparison is. All that press, all those appearances, all that beef-stoking, outpaced by someone who could not even leave a cell to promote. Whether the exact figures hold up under scrutiny is almost beside the point. The narrative had already hardened into concrete. The biggest boss was having the weakest week, and every additional voice that joined the chorus made it harder for Rick Ross to change the subject. Now let us rewind and audit the rollout itself, because the seeds of this collapse were planted long before release day, and this is the part the Boss Patrol does not want to discuss. Watch the tape again with fresh eyes. In appearance after appearance, Rick Ross was not really promoting songs. He was promoting identity. Every interview answer curved back to the same themes. Ownership, longevity, independence, real wealth versus rented wealth. And whenever the conversation drifted toward 50 Cent, Ross never dodged. He leaned in. He questioned who holds 50 Cent's masters. He revisited the old lawsuit chapter and framed himself as the man who walked out of court victorious. He painted his rival as an artist propped up by legends, while casting himself as the self-funded empire builder who answers to no one. Those are strong talking points. To a loyal audience, they land beautifully. But here is the fatal strategic flaw. Every minute Rick Ross spent litigating a 15-year-old rivalry was a minute he did not spend giving new listeners a single reason to press play. The rollout was optimized for the already converted, the day one fans who were buying the album anyway, while the broader, algorithm-fed audience that actually decides first week fate heard nothing but noise about an old war. And noise does not convert. Narrative converts. 50 Cent knows that in his bones, which is exactly why his counter-campaign contained almost no argument at all. Just images, numbers, and punchlines. One side was writing essays. The other side was writing headlines. Headlines 1. Look closer at the messaging discipline, because the contrast is brutal. The Rick Ross camp pushed a sophisticated thesis that inflated streaming has corrupted the scoreboard, that drastic second-week collapses expose the bot economy, that consistency is the new dominance. Intellectually, that thesis has real merit. Industry analysts have raised the same questions about artificial streaming for years, and the charts have produced enough suspicious spikes to make anybody cynical. But a thesis requires an audience willing to sit with complexity. And a feuding audience wants blood, not nuance. So while Rick Ross was explaining the philosophy of the long game, the internet was screenshotting seeding charts. He was playing chess in a room where everybody else showed up to watch a street fight. That mismatch between the sophistication of the message and the savagery of the medium is the single most underreported reason this rollout bled the way it did. And it is a lesson every artist 15 years deep should tattoo on the inside of their eyelids. In the attention economy, the person who defines the frame wins. Ross let his oldest enemy hold the frame from day one. And we have to talk about timing, because timing is the silent killer in the story. Releasing an album into a window already heated by your own public feuds is a double-edged blade. The attention spike is real, but so is the scrutiny. Every casual observer who might have streamed the project out of pure curiosity instead arrived with a scoreboard in hand, trained by weeks of trash talk to judge the album as a verdict rather than a body of work. The music never got to be music. It became evidence. And once art becomes evidence in a public trial, the trial is all anyone watches. 18 tracks. 2 decades of experience pressed into audio. And the album became a footnote in its own release week. Whatever your allegiance, that outcome should sit uncomfortably with anyone who claims to love the music first. But hold on, because just when this story looked like a completely one-sided beatdown, Rick Ross did something that reminded everybody why he has survived 20 years in an industry that eats veterans alive. He went live, and he shifted the entire battlefield. Instead of defending numbers, he launched a counter-offensive aimed straight at the 50 Cent business empire. Ross went directly at the G-Unit film studio project down in Shreveport, questioning the funding, questioning the loans, demanding to know whether money borrowed from other people had been returned. He mocked the entire premise, asking why anyone would build a film studio when Hollywood already exists. He went at the G-Unit sneakers, predicting they would end up collecting dust on warehouse shelves, though in true Ross fashion he could not resist adding that the Lloyd Banks designs were actually the best of the bunch, and that Banks deserved his own high top. He even extended a mock-generous offer, telling 50 Cent he could come sit at the table and pitch his studio ideas like a man seeking investment, because in Ross's words, new money does not discuss the past. It was petty. It was theatrical. It was vintage Rick Ross. And for a moment, the internet remembered that this man did not build an empire by accident. He built it with a personality engineered for exactly this kind of warfare. And buried inside the jokes was his most serious strategic argument of all. Ownership. Over and over throughout this feud, Rick Ross returns to one central theme, and he asks it like a mantra. Who owns your masters? He reminds anyone listening that he still controls his own catalog to this day, and that in his framing, he built what he built without a savior. He points at 50 Cent's history and says the quiet part loudly. Eminem saved you. Dr. Dre saved you. The machine carried you. He has even referenced 50 Cent's early record contract as a cautionary tale, questioning why nobody around a diamond-selling debut thought to renegotiate for ownership before albums 2, 3, and 4 locked in. Now strip away the trash talk and you find a genuinely interesting debate about 2 different philosophies of success. One man built a music and television empire with legendary cosigns and turned it into Hollywood power. The other built a diversified portfolio, franchises, real estate, spirits, on the back of independence and relentless branding. Both roads led to fortunes. But in a feud, nuance is the first casualty, and both men know it. Here is the part that fascinates me most, though. The psychology underneath all of it. There is an old interview clip of 50 Cent that resurfaced during this latest round, and in it he explains his theory of why Rick Ross can never truly let this beef die. His argument was cold and almost clinical. When things go quiet for Ross, mentioning 50 Cent is the fastest way to generate coverage. In other words, the feud itself is a marketing asset, and Ross is the one who keeps making withdrawals from it. Now flip that around. Is it not equally true that 50 Cent's trolling of Rick Ross generates enormous engagement for 50 Cent? Every clowning post gets screenshotted, aggregated, and turned into content by 100 channels, including, let us be honest, channels like this one. The rivalry is a two-way economy. Both men profit from it. Both men know the other profits from it. And yet neither will be the one to walk away first, because in their world, walking away reads as losing. So the machine keeps spinning year after year, album cycle after album cycle, and we all keep watching. Ask yourself honestly, if these two shook hands tomorrow, would the internet even celebrate? Or would it mourn the loss of its longest running show? Drop that answer in the comments, because I genuinely want to know where you stand on it. And the ripple effects keep spreading outward, pulling more names into the gravity. Wallow weighed in on the bigger picture, how streaming platforms and social algorithms shape what audiences actually see, and whether a massive engagement artist like Drake simply dominates those systems by default, while veterans like Rick Ross fight for oxygen. That is a real conversation worth having, and no, it does not prove anyone is being secretly suppressed, but it does explain how two albums can exist in the same month and live in completely different universes of attention. Even a resurfaced clip of the late, great DMX made the rounds, where he compared Rick Ross's feel to Biggie's and offered his trademark, unfiltered takes on the whole landscape. Though to be clear, those comments were made years ago in a completely different context, long before today's chapter of any rivalry, and they should never be retrofitted as commentary on the current situation. Respect to a legend. Context matters. One more detail deserves the spotlight before the verdict, and it is the detail nobody bothered to verify at speed. The crowd itself. Buried inside the ticket discourse was a story the timeline ignored. Veteran touring acts across every genre are navigating the softest live market in years, and plenty of artists with platinum plaques are discounting seats right alongside Rick Ross. That context never trended. It never stood a chance. Nuance does not screenshot well. But it matters, because it means the emptiest-looking photos from this rollout may say less about one man's decline and more about an entire industry's recalibration. And if that is true, then the loudest victory lap of this feud may have been run on a track that was already cracking beneath everybody's feet. Now, here comes the part nobody in the comment sections wants to hear, but it needs to be said out loud. Judging a 20-year veteran by one album cycle in 2026 is a fundamentally broken metric. The music business has been rebuilt from the ground up at least 3 times since these men debuted. Physical sales collapsed. Downloads rose and died. Streaming rewrote what a unit even means. Audiences fragmented into algorithms. Expecting Rick Ross to post numbers from his commercial peak is like expecting a veteran athlete to match their prime year statistics. It misunderstands both the player and the era. That does not erase the week he just had. But it does explain it. And let us not gloss over the roster of supporting voices that turn this from a two-man feud into a full industry referendum. Podcast panels lit up within hours of the first numbers. Some hosts cringing at the figures, others defending the long-game philosophy, all of them feeding the same engagement furnace. Fan pages ran side-by-side graphics. Stan accounts dug up decade-old chart positions from both catalogs and staged mock trials in the replies. Even neutral commentators who had never touched this feud before found themselves pulled in, because the story contained the one ingredient the internet can never resist. A confident giant caught in a vulnerable week. That is the narrative gravity of this saga. It recruits everyone it touches. DJs became analysts. Meme pages became court reporters. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise sat an actual album, waiting for somebody, anybody, to talk about the music. There is also a generational story hiding in here that deserves its flowers. A decade ago, a feud like this would have played out on radio freestyles and magazine covers, controlled by gatekeepers who decided which shots got heard. Today it plays out in real time across stories, live streams, and fan accounts. No middlemen. No filters. No waiting for the Tuesday chart to tell you what to think. That shift favors a specific kind of artist, the one who understands that narrative now moves faster than music. 50 Cent understood that before almost anyone in his generation. He was clowning his rivals with images before the word meme ever entered the mainstream vocabulary. Rick Ross understood it too, just differently. His version was to become larger than the story, to answer every attack with a bigger house, a bigger chain, a bigger sermon about boss living. Two opposing schools of survival, both proven over 20 years, now colliding inside a landscape that rewards them both for never resolving the fight. So before we get to the heaviest moment of this entire saga, I need to hear from you again. Which school are you? The scoreboard is sacred or the scoreboard is rigged? Because the next part of this story has nothing to do with charts at all, and everything to do with the word accountability. But just when you think this story has exhausted every possible direction, Rick Ross opened a completely different front, and this one was not entertainment. This one was heavy. In the middle of all the noise, Ross went live and turned his attention to Briscoe, the former Cash Money artist, and what followed was not trolling. Ross declared that the word of the day was accountability, and then he made a series of extremely serious allegations about a years-old criminal case out of North Miami. Ross repeatedly labeled Briscoe a rat and claimed that Briscoe's courtroom testimony helped send 3 men away for decades over a robbery, a chain snatching that Ross described as involving jewelry with fake stones. Ross mocked the courtroom identification itself, reenacting the moment a witness points across the room, and he urged Briscoe to contact the prosecutor and revise that identification, claiming the men have already served more than 20 years. His closing chant was simple and aimed like a dart. Free them. Now I have to be absolutely direct with you here, because this channel separates fact from fire. These are Rick Ross's allegations. They are his public statements, his interpretation of events from years ago, and without the court records in front of us, they cannot be treated as established fact. Serious accusations require serious evidence, and that standard does not bend for entertainment. But what is undeniable is the shift in tone it created. In the middle of a feud built on memes and chart screenshots, Rick Ross suddenly introduced themes of prison time, accountability, and justice. And then, almost in the same breath, he pivoted into something genuinely reflective. A speech about Miami, money, and the next generation. He talked about his own early deal, around $30,000 for 6 albums while surrendering half his publishing, and he framed it not as a blueprint, but as a warning. His message to young artists was unmistakable. I do not want your publishing. I want you to shine. Invest in yourself. Learn the business. Become the boss instead of renting the title. Say what you want about Rick Ross. That part right there was real. And this is where I want to slow down for a second, because it would be very easy to make this video a victory lap for one side and a funeral for the other. But that is not what actually happened here, and you deserve the full picture. So let me paint it. On one side, 50 Cent executing what might be his most disciplined trolling campaign in years. Chart numbers weaponized. Ticket sales turned into theater. $100 million flex challenged in public. A 3-word eulogy for his rival's album cycle. On the other side, Rick Ross absorbing hit after hit, countering with ownership arguments, business accusations, a mentor-minded message to young artists, and an unshakable refusal to act embarrassed. And hovering above both of them, the Drake dimension, because Ross chose to critique the biggest commercial force in the genre during his own vulnerable moment, and the response, subtle or not, reminded everybody which league the streaming numbers actually live in. 2 philosophies. 2 scoreboards. 1 war that refuses to end. So where does that leave us? Hold everything you have heard in this video in 2 hands at once. In one hand, the numbers, the screenshots, the very real commercial stumble that 50 Cent converted into a public execution of narrative. In the other hand, a 20-year career, an owned catalog, a diversified empire, and a defiance so consistent it has become its own form of victory. Both things are true at the same time. The flop is real. The legacy is real. The trolling is ruthless. The resilience is undeniable. And the war, the longest, strangest, most profitable non-war in hip-hop history, rolls on toward its next detonation. Remember what I told you at the very top of this video? 50 Cent never broke a sweat. Now you can see why. He never needed to. The trap was built by Rick Ross's own confidence, armed by the Boss Patrol's own promotion, and triggered by the scoreboard itself. All 50 Cent had to do was post 3 words and let gravity do the rest. That is what a perfect strike looks like. And before we let this go, zoom all the way out, because there is one final layer almost nobody covering this story has bothered to examine. The fan economy. Scroll through the comment sections under every video, every blog post, every reposted screenshot from this rollout, and you will find something fascinating. The audience is not actually divided between Rick Ross and 50 Cent. The audience is divided between two philosophies. One camp believes the scoreboard is sacred. Numbers are numbers, a flop is a flop, and if you call yourself the biggest boss, you had better bring boss-sized receipts. The other camp believes the scoreboard itself is rigged, that in an era of playlist politics, algorithmic gatekeeping, and engagement engineering, raw first-week figures measure a machine, not a man. Both camps are convinced the other is delusional. Both camps are generating thousands of comments a day. And sitting quietly above the whole spectacle, collecting the engagement from both sides, are the two men who started it. Because whether you are defending Ross or clowning him, you are doing it inside an economy that pays them both. That is the truth at the bottom of all of this. The feud is not a bug in their careers. It is a feature. It has survived changing sounds, changing platforms, changing audiences, because it stopped being personal a long time ago and became something closer to ritual. Two architects of the modern rap entrepreneur blueprint, forever circling each other, each one secretly needing the other to remain the villain in his story. Remove 50 Cent from the equation and Rick Ross loses his favorite measuring stick. Remove Ross and 50 Cent loses his most reliable target. That is not a rivalry anymore. That is a partnership neither man will ever sign. And the wildest part? Somewhere right now, one of them is watching the reaction to this latest chapter, taking notes, and quietly loading the next clip. Count on it. Because understand this about these two. Neither has ever once allowed the other to have the final word. Not in courtrooms. Not on charts. Not on timelines. 15 plus years, and the tally of final words exchanged between them stands at 0. The only real question left is the one neither man can answer. After all these years, all these rounds, all these receipts and counters, what would winning even look like? Sit with that. Then tell me below. So now the floor is yours, and I want real answers, not drive-by comments. First, did 50 Cent land the decisive blow of this entire 15-year war, or did Rick Ross quietly win by refusing to break character? Second, was Ross right to call out the bots and the inflation era? Is no bots the new flex, or is that just the language of a man explaining a bad week? And third, the one I really want you to fight about down there. Two front wars. Should Ross have ever taken aim at Drake in the middle of a vulnerable rollout? Bold leadership, or a catastrophic strategic error? Pick a side and defend it. I will be down in the comments reading every single one, and the best argument gets pinned to the top. If this breakdown gave you the full picture, the numbers, the context, both sides of the war, do 3 things for me. Hit that like button so the algorithm knows this was worth your time. Subscribe if you want the next chapter of this saga the moment it drops, because with these two, there is always a next chapter. And share this with one person who thinks they already know who won. They do not. And if you thought this was deep, wait until you see what we uncovered about the aftermath of the biggest battle of this entire era. That video is waiting for you on your end screen right now. Click it. I will see you there.